Apple might finally be ready to bring down one of the most recognizable flagship features to its cheapest iPhone, and honestly it's about time. Finally, the notch is dead, guys. According to a new leak from well-known source Digital Chat Station, the upcoming iPhone 17 is reportedly going to feature the dynamic island. Yes, that little animated blob at the top of the screen that gets all the Apple sheep tingling. For those who somehow don't know what the dynamic island is, where were you all these years? It's basically Apple's way of turning a camera cutout into a mini status bar. It shows you timers, music playback, calls, and more, all while housing the front camera and Face ID sensors. It was first introduced on the iPhone 14 Pro, then made its way to the base models the following year, but up until now it's been strictly a premium feature. The budget crowds? Stuck in Notch City. The leaker added though that despite finally joining the modern era, the 17E is gonna have a 60Hz OLED display. So yeah, it's not quite Promotion Island, but it's a start. In classic Apple fashion, you get some upgrades, but not everything. Apparently you'll use the same 6.1-inch panel from the iPhone 16 and 15, which tracks perfectly with Apple's recycling program of parts. Now let's talk about price, because that's where things get interesting. The 17E is expected to start at $599, the same as the 16E, with once again starting at 128 gigs of storage. So yeah, no storage increase like we saw with the rest of the iPhone 17 models, and once 17E launches, the iPhone 16E likely is going to drop to $499, which suddenly makes the entry-level iPhone lineup more appealing than it's been in years. Two solid options, both running pretty modern Apple Silicon chips, both also looking relatively modern. I mean, I know the notch is still there on the 16E, but it's better than the iPhone SE. Now you'd expect the 17E to launch a year after the 16E, but apparently it might show up a little later, around May 2026. Why? Well, according to Fixed Focus Digital, Apple wants to directly compete with another mid-range smartphone from a rival brand that typically drops around that time, possibly Xiaomi, Redmi, or Vivo. So basically Apple's turning up late to the party on purpose. Either way, I'm just glad to see some consistency here. The E-series seems to be sticking to a yearly cycle, which gives buyers a predictable upgrade window, unlike the SE models, which were released so randomly you needed a calendar, compass, and a bit of luck to predict exactly when they would launch. So we've got the island, but what else can we expect? Let's start with the design. Rumours suggest the iPhone 17 is finally going to ditch the boxy edges of the iPhone 14, which it inherited, and move on to the more rounded frame of the iPhone 15. That might sound minor, but when in the hand, it is a big deal. The rounded chassis just feels nicer, and less like a gripping a razor blade. Apple even bragged about this when the iPhone 15 launched, saying it's more comfortable to hold, and we still have that design language today with the iPhone 17 series, so bringing that down to the entry-level model makes perfect sense. It makes even the cheapest model feel premium, without Apple actually having to spend too much R&D, because they're just recycling existing shells. Timothy's certainly happy about that. Now, if you've been enjoying this breakdown so far, don't forget to subscribe and hype the video. It really helps a small channel like mine reach more people who love Apple leaks and iPhone speculation as much as we do. Anyway, don't expect miracles. This phone won't have everything at $599. As I mentioned earlier, the 17E is going to have a 6.1-inch OLED display, locked at 60Hz. That's going to trigger the Android fanboys. They're going to be so angry. In 2026, a 60Hz screen does feel like a sports car that caps out at 60 miles per hour. But Apple knows exactly what they're doing. This isn't about matching Android specs, it's about offering the cheapest ticket into iOS. And for many buyers, especially for those upgrading from much older phones, that's actually more than enough. I mean, the 16E isn't very competitive specs-wise, but still, it's a bestseller and outsells most Android phones. So yeah, it's not all bad. Even though Apple's keeping the same display tech as the 16E, the addition of the dynamic island will make this phone feel more modern overall. I'm expecting bezels roughly in line with the iPhone 15 and 16, not ultra thin, but not budget iPhone thick either. Hopefully we see a slight bump in brightness as well, because the 16E's 800 nits is, let's be honest, pretty mid, so please Timothy, I beg you bump it to 2000 nits. My eyes and the sun will thank you. Now let's be real, the iPhone 17E's biggest competition won't even be Android's, it will be Apple's own lineup. When the 17E launches, the 16 will probably still be in the range for around $100 more, and they'll have perks like the ultra-wide lens, MagSafe support, and Apple's new ultra-wideband chipset, and also nicer colours. Depending on how you use your phone, that could make the 16 a smarter buy. And if you're willing to buy refurbished, that makes things even more interesting. In the UK, the 16 can already be found for around £479. That's cheaper than the iPhone 17 is supposed to be, and that price is only heading one way, down. So yeah, I think the 16 is ultimately going to be the better buy, but for those who want something new with warranty and the latest chipset, the 17E still kinda makes sense. Now let's talk about MagSafe, because don't get your hopes up, I highly doubt Apple's going to bring this to the 17E. They'll almost certainly leave it out again, just so it doesn't eat into sales of pricier iPhones, which is frustrating because with Qi2 wireless charging now rolling out at 25 watts across newer models, the 17 missing out is painful, I can't lie, but hey, this is Apple. Pay more, get magnets. Simple as that. One area that might quietly improve though is connectivity. The 16E introduced Apple's first in-house modem, the C1. The Air later got the C1X, so expect the 17E to either adopt that or move up to the C2, which should be faster and possibly support millimeter wave 5G. That could also bring better efficiency and stronger battery life, which, to be fair, was already great on the 16E, but Apple improving that would be appreciated regardless. Apple might also chuck in the N1 or the N2 wireless chipset, improving Wi-Fi, Bluetooth and AirDrop performance. Little invisible upgrades that make everyday use just smoother. Let's talk about colours, or the lack thereof, because don't expect anything wild. Apple usually saves the fun new shades for its higher end models, so while the iPhone 17 got that lovely sage and mist blue, the 17E is probably gonna stay in the safe zone, black and white. And while we're comparing, the differences between the 17 and 17E is going to stack up pretty quickly. A slightly larger 6.3 inch display, ProMotion, always on display, slimmer bezels, more storage, and the ultra-wide lens. Apple knows exactly how to make you spend that extra $200. They are the undisputed masters of upselling. You go in for the cheap iPhone and somehow you walk out $200 lighter saying, "This comes in a nicer blue, I want this blue." Performance-wise, the A19 chip is going to be the headline win here. Apple could have easily reused last year's chipset and called it a day, but the fact that 17E is getting the same silicon as the standard 17 is actually pretty nice. That means this phone's going to stay fast for years, and for most, that's all that really matters. The A19's efficiency is going to also help with battery life, which is quietly becoming one of the strongest areas across the range. The 16E was already great, as I said, but Apple improving battery life even further, that's going to be great. Camera-wise, the 17E will likely keep the 40MP single camera, maybe with some improved processing. No telephoto, no ultra-wide, just the essential main lens, that's it. I do wonder if we'll see the 18MP square sensor on the front that's on the 17, but realistically, Apple's probably going to keep that exclusive to the higher end models. Now, one of the funniest parts about this leak cycle is seeing how Apple manages to make old hardware feel new. We've seen this before. They give us a new design that's just been recycled, give us a new chipset, and suddenly it's the most advanced iPhone ever. Do you get it? Yeah, okay, that was terrible, I'm sorry. But anyway, this is a technique that works for Apple, and the 17E will of course be a better deal than the 16E was. It's also kind of wild to think about how far Apple's budget iPhones have come. Remember when this relic, the iPhone SE, was the affordable option? It looked like something that belonged in a museum. But the E-series has completely flipped that perception. Yes, it's more expensive, but it does actually feel current, and it has a somewhat modern design. And with the dynamic island, A19 chipset, and the slightly rounder corners, the 17E continues that streak. The only question is, will the lack of promotion and MagSafe hold people back? Possibly, but I think Apple's target audience for the 17E isn't the tech-obsessed crowd comparing refresh rates. It's for those who just want a modern-looking iPhone with Apple's reliability, solid cameras, and long-term support, without spending $1,000. So the best way to think about the 17E is a spiritual successor to the SE, but one that's finally caught up with the rest of the world. It's simple, familiar, but modern enough to not feel like a compromise. But what do you think? Would you go for the 17E over a refurbished 16, or does the lack of promotion make this a hard pass for you? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe and hit the hype button. It helps the channel massively and keeps me fueled with caffeine for the next round of Apple leaks. Thanks for watching.